Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive.
Yeah, welcome back.
Today, we are going out to high school,
Oh,
at
yeah.
least in a literary sense.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll all be a little wiser,
Yeah.
having gone through this material again.
And not have to relive all of the awkwardness and trauma.
Right, exactly.
So what have we got to work with today?
Well, you've sent in a really interesting mix this time around. We've got excerpts from the novel The Perks of Being a Wallflower,
By Stephen Chbosky.
right, by Stephen Chbosky. And alongside those excerpts, we've also got some of those early critical responses to the book when it first came out.
That's right, those initial reactions from the literary world.
Yeah, so we can kind of get a sense of the impact.
So for this deep dive, we're going to try to do two things.
Okay.
One, we really want to get to the heart of this novel.
Yeah.
What's it really about? What are those big themes that Chbosky's exploring?
Right.
And two, we want to get to know the main character, Charlie.
Yeah, I mean, he's really the heart and soul of this book.
Through his letters.
Through his letters, exactly.
So we're going to look through the lens of both the critics and Charlie's own very personal account to understand what makes this book tick and what makes Charlie such a compelling and relatable character.
Right. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because we get those outside perspectives from the critics, but then we also get to go inside Charlie's head through his letters.
So let's start with those critical responses. What really jumped out at you when you were looking through that material?
Well, I have to say, the thing that struck me first was just how positive the overall reaction to this book was. I mean, people really seemed to connect with it right from the start.
Yeah, there's a real warmth there.
Yeah. And, one review from the LA Times, for instance, they really praised Charlie's loving instincts and his pure wisdom.
Interesting.
And they also highlighted Chbosky's writing style, calling it plain and springy and blunt.
Yeah, that really captures that directness.
It does. And there was this almost, kind of like this almost a tenderness in the review, this hope that, nothing too bad would happen to Charlie, especially given, their perspective on adolescence as being kind of a dirty word in our culture.
That's a really interesting point, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's almost this sense of wanting to protect him.
Yeah, definitely.
The school library journal also seemed to pick up on that goodness in Charlie. They gave the book a starred review,
Wow.
and they emphasized just how real, how palpably real Charlie, his friends, and family felt.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to really buy into the authenticity of those characters.
They did, and they pointed to his development from being an observant wallflower
Right. He starts off very much as an observer.
to someone who actually starts taking action in his own life,
Right. He starts participating more.
which they felt would really speak to teenagers.
I mean, that's a very relatable journey, isn't it? That movement from kind of being on the outside to finding your place and making your voice heard.
Yeah, and Booklist really expanded on that idea of Charlie becoming more of a participant.
Okay.
They talked about how Chbosky captures that whole spectrum of teenage experience, adolescent angst, confusion, and joy.
It's a whole roller coaster of emotions, isn't it?
It really is. And he does it through Charlie's very compelling way of reflecting on his life.
Yeah, they really highlighted his introspection.
And they also made a point of saying that he's intellectually quite advanced. He's constantly trying to figure out who he is and who he's becoming.
So not your typical teenager.
Right. There's a depth there.
Yeah. A real thoughtfulness.
And it's not all smooth sailing for Marley.
Yeah.
Charlie Booklist also pointed out that he tends to swing between full involvement in the crazy course of his life and backing off completely.
Right. There's that push and pull.
Yeah, that really feels authentic to those teenage years, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes you want to jump in with both feet, and sometimes you just need to retreat and recharge.
And despite everything that he goes through, they made sure to mention that Charlie comes across as a genuinely likable kid, dealing with his often humor-laced trials and tribulations.
Right. Even in the midst of difficult situations, there's that little glimmer of humor.
Exactly. And they felt that this would appeal to a broad audience, both teens and adults.
It's interesting how they saw that potential for the book to bridge that gap
Right.
between, young adult fiction
Yeah.
and something that could resonate with older readers as well.
Well, I think it's because of that depth that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Booklist also pointed out his very thoughtful reflections and intellectual maturity.
You're suggesting something deeper?
It makes you wonder what it is about his voice that makes him so relatable to such a wide range of people.
Yeah, definitely.
And we see all of those elements that the critics picked up on in Charlie's letters.
Okay.
His intellectual curiosity,
Right.
that strain of humor running through his observations, the
Yeah.
very real struggles that he faces, and that constant dance between wanting to be involved and needing to pull back.
And that's what makes him so human.
It is, isn't
I
it?
mean, we've all been there.
And remember, the school library journal talked about him becoming his own man of action,
Right.
which is so interesting because they also described him as that observant wallflower.
It speaks to a real transformation, doesn't it?
It does. There's an arc of growth there.
Absolutely.
And I think what's really interesting is how consistent those early reviews are.
Okay.
The LA Times also talked about Charlie's pure wisdom.
Yeah, amidst all the challenges he faces.
And they clearly felt protective of him.
Right.
And remember that description of the language as plain and springy and blunt?
Yes.
Well, that perfectly captures that directness of Charlie's writing in his letters.
It's like we're right there in his head with him.
Yeah, it's almost like we're reading his diary.
Exactly.
And it's so powerful how the LA Times calls out that tendency, in society to view adolescence negatively.
Right, like it's just this phase to get through.
Yeah, and they suggest that this book is offering a much more empathetic
And nuance.
and nuanced portrayal.
Yeah, a more realistic view.
And one review even mentioned the book having an upbeat ending, which I thought was really fascinating because it suggests a balance, between the realism of those teenage struggles
Right.
and a sense of hope.
Yeah.
Which probably contributed to why it became so popular for high school reading lists.
Right, it's not just doom and gloom. There's light at the end of the tunnel.
There is.
And that's important for young readers.
Absolutely.
Now, beyond just those typical teenage experiences, those reviews also gave us a glimpse into Charlie's inner world.
What do you mean?
Well, for instance, one review mentioned him, just oozing with sincerity.
Yeah, he does come across as very genuine.
He does, and they also talked about his disdain for what they called celebrity phoniness.
Yeah, he's not impressed by all the glitz and glamour.
Not at all. He sees through that right to the heart of things.
It speaks to his genuine nature, doesn't it?
It does.
And his connection with those classic authors like Harper Lee, Fitzgerald, Kerouac, Ayn Rand.
Wow, quite a range.
It really highlights his intellectual depth and his search for meaning in literature.
Yeah, it's like he's trying to make sense of the world through those different voices.
That's a really interesting way to put it.
And this is where things get really interesting.
Oh.
Because one review actually points out that his plain written narrative,
Okay.
while feeling very authentic,
Yeah. Right.
it can also suggest a certain passivity and thinking too much,
Oh.
which ultimately leads to confusion and anxiety for Charlie.
Wow. That's a really insightful observation.
It is.
And it connects so directly to what we see unfolding in his letters.
Right.
It's almost like his sincerity and his tendency to overthink things are two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, they feed into each other.
So we've seen how the book was initially received.
Right, those early critical responses.
Let's turn to Charlie's own voice now and his experiences as he shares them in his letters.
Okay, let's see what he has to say.
And maybe we can see if these critical observations hold true.
All right.
And perhaps even gain some deeper insights into his character.
Okay.
Now, Charlie's early experiences are really marked by loss and grief.
Right.
Right at the beginning of his first letter, he talks about Michael's suicide at the start of the school year.
Oh, yeah, that's a very heavy way to start high school.
What struck you about his initial reaction to that event?
Well, I think what's really noticeable is his confusion.
Right?
He mentions that there wasn't a note and that all anyone really knew was that Michael was having problems at home.
Yeah.
And there's just this real lack of understanding, and it's clear that it really bothers him.
Yeah, he actually says,
Yeah.
I think that not knowing is what really bothers me.
Right.
And it's even interesting because he observes that his writing doesn't quite sound like his usual way of speaking.
Yeah, he's aware of it.
Which I think really underscores how deeply this event has affected him.
Yeah, he's shaken.
He's not even writing the same way.
Right, and that lack of closure, it just seems to amplify his distress.
It does, doesn't it? It's like he needs an explanation.
He needs to make sense of it.
Yeah, and it's clear that Michael's death has really impacted him on multiple levels. He even mentions how his teacher started treating him differently after it happened.
How so?
Well, they started giving him better grades, even though he doesn't feel like he's doing any better intellectually.
Huh, that's interesting.
It's as if they weren't sure how to interact with him after this tragedy.
Right, like they're walking on eggshells around him.
Yeah, and he even says they seemed all nervous.
Oh, wow.
I think it highlights the awkwardness and the difficulty that often surround discussions of suicide, especially with young people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it's such a sensitive topic, and it can be hard to know what to say or do.
Absolutely.
And, when we think about it, this loss, it really casts a shadow over Charlie's whole entry into high school.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, the very beginning of this new chapter of his life is marked by this tragedy.
Yeah, and then you have the unsettling experience of Michael's funeral,
Right.
where his father didn't cry,
Oh, wow.
and then his parents separated.
That's a lot for a young person to process.
It is. It really emphasizes the disruptive and bewildering impact of grief, especially for someone so young who's still trying to figure out the world.
Right. It's like the rug has been pulled out from under him,
It really is.
and he's left trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah, and he also shares a memory of a time when his dad slapped him for upsetting Aunt Helen.
Oh.
And then Aunt Helen defended him, and later his mom reveals the really difficult experiences her sister had endured.
So there's a lot of unspoken pain within that family.
There is, and Charlie includes this line, "Some people really do have it a lot worse than I do."
That's a powerful statement,
It is, isn't it?
especially coming from someone so young.
It really suggests a deep sense of empathy, even in his youth.
He's able to see beyond his own struggles and acknowledge the suffering of others.
And then we have Susan's memory of Michael shortly before his death,
Okay.
which emphasizes their close friendship.
Right. They were really good friends.
Which seems to stand in contrast to typical high school social dynamics.
Yeah, it's not always easy to find those genuine connections in high school.
And it humanizes Michael, beyond just the tragic act of suicide.
Yeah, we see him as a person who was loved and who had meaningful relationships.
And even with all of this really heavy emotional stuff going on, there's this most charming little detail that Charlie includes.
Oh, what's that?
He says that his biggest takeaway from the week was learning more consistent punctuation.
Oh, wow.
Right?
That's so Charlie.
It is, isn't it?
He's focusing on the little things.
Even in the midst of really profound emotional distress.
It's a reminder that life, even in its most challenging moments, still has those little everyday details.
It does.
And it's those little details that sometimes help us get through.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of what makes Charlie so palpably real, as the school library journal said.
Right, he's relatable because he notices those things.
Now, shifting gears a little bit.
Okay.
Charlie also talks about feeling really lonely, especially with his older siblings being away, living their own lives.
Yeah, that sense of being on the periphery
Yeah.
seems to be a recurring theme for him.
It does. He's the observer.
The wallflower.
And he talks about his hope for friendship with the kid who told the truth.
Yeah, but it sounds like that didn't really pan out the way he hoped.
No.
It just highlights how much he craves that genuine connection.
Yeah.
And how much it hurts when those initial attempts don't quite work out.
And I think that's something that a lot of people can relate to, especially during those teenage years,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're trying to figure out where you fit in and who you can trust.
And then there's his reaction to seeing his brother on television playing football.
Okay.
Now, he admits that they don't really talk that much even when his brother is home.
Right, they're super close.
But this event becomes a real highlight for him during those first few weeks of high school.
Interesting.
His mom cries, his dad shows affection, even his sister, who he says fights with him a lot, smiles.
It's like this moment of family unity.
It is, isn't it? And I think it reveals this underlying family pride and maybe even Charlie's own sense of vicarious connection.
Yeah, maybe he feels a little bit of that glory through his brother.
Yeah, and it's like this shared positive experience that momentarily bridges that distance that usually exists in their family.
And then, of course, we have the immediate and profound impact of literature on Charlie.
Right.
He talks about To Kill a Mockingbird becoming his instant favorite book.
Which is so fitting.
Yeah, and it seems like he finds solace and understanding in stories,
Right.
It aligns with what the critics said about his strong connection to writers and the world of literature.
Absolutely.
It's like books become a way for him to process his own experiences.
Right, and to find frameworks for understanding those complex emotions and social dynamics.
Yeah, literature serves as both a mirror and a guide for him.
It's a way to reflect on his own life, but also to learn from the experiences of others.
Exactly.
Now let's talk a little bit about relationships and that whole process of growing up.
Okay.
We see him making a mixtape for a girl.
Because his sister had success with a boy using his music recommendation.
So he's trying his hand at romance.
Yeah, and he seems hopeful,
Right.
about the possibility of future connections.
It's a small gesture, but it signifies his desire to participate in the social rituals of adolescence.
It does, doesn't it? And then there's that rather jarring experience of him walking in on his sister and a boy naked,
Oh my gosh.
and her really harsh reaction.
Right.
It's an incredibly awkward moment, that highlights the confusing and often contradictory nature of adolescence and sexuality,
Yeah, absolutely.
both for Charlie and for his sister.
And it kind of exposes that disconnect between private experiences and public shaming.
Right, even within a
Yeah,
family.
right.
We also see Charlie starting to connect with Patrick in shop class.
Oh, yeah. Patrick, who's initially just known as Nothing.
Yeah.
That's an interesting nickname.
It is, and this friendship really becomes significant for Charlie.
It does, and it's interesting that he's drawn to Patrick because Patrick is friendly and shares his interest in football. Right, he's just a normal guy.
It highlights Charlie's need for straightforward connection.
Absolutely.
And throughout the narrative, there are these smaller details that help paint a picture of their lives and relationships.
Yeah, like his sister getting back her Autumn Leaves mixtape, which hints at her own romantic entanglements.
Right, and the role that music plays in those relationships.
Exactly. Or the fact that Charlie gets a C on his To Kill a Mockingbird essay because of his run-on sentences and not using enough vocabulary words.
Even though he loves the book?
He does, and he's aware of his weaknesses as a writer.
Right.
And he's trying to improve.
Yeah, which is important.
It is. And he also makes some really astute observations about celebrity magazines.
Okay.
He's skeptical of their authenticity, you know?
Yeah, he sees through the facade.
Which is interesting because they're so popular with his peers.
It shows his developing critical thinking skills.
And it's fascinating how early on these critical observations about the world start to emerge in him.
Yeah, he's not just blindly accepting what he's told.
He's thinking for himself.
Exactly.
And then there are his memories of spending time with Aunt Helen and watching TV with her, which really highlight the power of those early relationships.
And the impact they have on us.
And he seems to be very conscious of that.
Right, he's reflecting on how those memories are shaping him.
Absolutely.
And then we have his romantic feelings for Sam.
Oh, yeah, Sam.
Which really come to the forefront when he has that dream about her.
Right. And he's so ashamed afterward.
He is.
Yeah.
And he ends up confessing to her.
And her reaction in that moment is so important.
It really shapes their relationship.
It does, and she responds with a lot of warmth and acceptance.
Yeah, she doesn't make it feel bad.
But she also sets really clear boundaries because of their age difference.
Right, she's being responsible.
And then she explains those unspoken rules about how boys and girls are supposed to interact.
Oh, yeah, all those unwritten rules of adolescence.
And it's so insightful because she's basically pointing out the performative aspects of those interactions.
It's like she's giving the decoder ring for social situations.
Exactly. And then Charlie starts thinking about things like hand-holding and school dances and what he thinks constitutes happiness in relationships.
So he's trying to make sense of it all.
He is. And his conversations with his English teacher, Bill, about observing people also contribute to his developing understanding of relationships.
Yeah, Bill becomes a kind of mentor to him, doesn't he?
He does.
And then there's that pivotal moment when Charlie tells Bill about his sister's boyfriend hitting her.
Yeah, that's a huge turning point.
It is.
And Bill says something so profound.
What does he say?
He says, "Charlie, we accept the love we think we deserve."
Wow, that's heavy.
It is, and it really gets to the heart of the book.
It does. It speaks to self-worth and the patterns we fall into in relationships.
It's a line that stays with you.
It does, and it has a huge impact on Charlie.
Absolutely. And then there's the fallout from Bill calling home about the situation.
Yeah.
Charlie feels responsible, and his sister is understandably angry.
Yeah, it's a messy situation.
It is, and it highlights the difficulty of navigating those sensitive family dynamics.
Right. When is it okay to intervene, and when do you need to respect boundaries?
Exactly, and those questions are even harder when it's your own family.
For sure.
Now let's shift gears again and talk about those moments of friendship and shared experiences.
Okay, those bright spots.
Yeah, because they're so crucial for Charlie.
They are. He needs that support system.
And even small moments like his brother's brief but positive interaction with Patrick and Sam at a football game
Right.
are really meaningful for Charlie.
Yeah, it's a subtle validation of his friendships.
And then there's that iconic scene in the car during the rain when they feel infinite.
Oh, yeah, that's a classic.
It perfectly captures the intensity of those teenage friendships, you know?
Right, when you feel completely understood and connected.
It's a feeling of pure joy and belonging.
It is. And going to parties with Sam and Patrick introduces him to a wider social circle.
Like Brad.
Yeah.
And then there's the incident with the special brownie at the party.
Oh, yeah, things get a little out of control there.
They do, but it also shows Sam's caring nature.
Right. She really takes care of him.
Yeah, she gets him a milkshake and says supportive things.
Yeah, she's a true friend.
She is, and Patrick's reaction in their private conversation afterwards establishes their little secret.
Oh, so there are some things they don't share with Sam.
Right, and it deepens their bond.
Yeah, it's like they're in this together.
And Sam plays him those really meaningful songs, Blackbird and MLK.
Oh, wow.
And that highlights the role that music plays in their connection.
Music is a big part of their friendship.
It is, and then there's that exhilarating experience of riding in the back of Sam's pickup truck through the Fort Pitt Tunnel with the wind and the music.
That's such a vivid image of youthful freedom.
It is.
But of course, not all friendships are without their complications.
Right.
And when Patrick shares his history with Brad,
Okay.
it reveals those difficult dynamics in their relationship.
The secret encounter.
Brad's denial and his hurtful behavior.
It exposes Charlie to the complexities of identity and the pressures of societal expectations.
And it's a really important contrast to some of the more carefree moments they share.
Right.
It's a reminder that things aren't always what they seem.
And Brad's increasingly negative behavior and his eventual entry into rehab show the darker side of what some teenagers experience.
Yeah, it's a stark reality check.
And meanwhile, Charlie is getting involved with the fanzine Punk Rocky,
Okay.
which is run by Mary Elizabeth.
Well, Mary Elizabeth.
And their interactions introduce a very different kind of dynamic into his social world.
How so?
Well, they have very different personalities and interests.
Right. They clash a little.
They do.
And then we have the anticipation surrounding his brother coming home for the holidays.
And the disappointment when he's not as communicative as Charlie had hoped.
Oh, that's tough.
It is.
It's that feeling of unmet expectations.
Yeah, and his brother's mainly focused on football.
Makes sense.
And he makes this dismissive comment about a teammate being dumb as a post. And it gives us a glimpse into these different forms of intelligence, you know?
Right.
And Charlie's own quiet yearning for some kind of glory days.
Even though he's not sure what those would look like for him.
Exactly.
And his observations during that dinner with Sam and Patrick at his house,
Okay.
particularly his focus on his neighbors, really underscores his interest in other people's lives.
Right. He's always watching.
He is. And then there's that poignant memory he shares of his brother unexpectedly understanding their grandfather during a quiet car ride.
Oh, wow.
It's this rare moment of connection between them,
Yeah, and a shared understanding of hardship.
which is something that Charlie's own mother wishes she had experienced with her father.
It's a really interesting insight into how people connect and share their inner lives.
Yeah, sometimes it happens in the most unexpected ways.
And then the Thanksgiving football game and the range of reactions within his family,
Oh, yeah.
from pride to his grandfather's tears.
It's a microcosm of their family dynamics.
Yeah, it really is. And Charlie's just quietly observing it all from the adult table.
Still the observer.
Yeah, but then he shares this really emotional goodbye with his brother before he goes back to college.
Ah,
And it shows that underlying affection.
right, even if they don't express it openly all the time.
Exactly.
And then the Secret Santa exchange with Sam and Patrick's friend group becomes a really significant event for Charlie.
It does. He's really excited about it.
It shows how much he values those friendships.
Yeah, and his gifts for Patrick are so thoughtful.
Like what?
Well, he gives him a mixtape and a magnetic poetry set and watercolors.
Oh, wow. He put a lot of thought into those.
He did, and a harmonica with an instruction book.
So sweet.
And finally, a book about Harvey Milk.
Okay.
It shows how much he cares about Patrick and how much he wants to understand him.
It's clear that he really pays attention to his friends.
He does.
And the party itself is held at Sam and Patrick's house.
Which seems like a very different environment from his own home.
Yeah, they seem to come from a wealthier background.
Yeah, and there are those slightly awkward moments during the gift exchange.
Like when he doesn't receive a suit code.
But then Sam gives him that incredibly kind hug
Aw,
and whispers, "I love you,"
as a friend.
as a friend.
And then her actual gift is amazing.
The old typewriter
Yeah.
with the note, "Write about me sometime."
Oh my gosh, that's so powerful.
It is, and Charlie's reaction is immediate and so positive.
He's blown away.
He is, and the very first thing he types is his recipient's name.
Wow. It's like that typewriter unlocks something in him.
It does.
And then there's that quiet moment where Sam asks if he's ever kissed a girl.
Right.
And she shares her own first kiss experience.
Yeah, she opens up to him.
It creates this sense of vulnerability and connection.
Yeah, they're confiding in each other.
But as the holiday season progresses, we start to see a shift in Charlie's emotional state. Beneath all the anticipation, there's this growing dread.
And it's almost like he's returning to that bad place he associates with the time after Aunt Helen's death.
Yeah, the trauma resurfaces.
And he starts having those dissociative feelings again.
Oh, no.
It's a reminder of that underlying trauma he still carries.
And how fragile his emotional well-being is. And his
Exactly.
feeling unwell while staying in his dad's old bedroom in Ohio over Christmas.
Yeah.
It really emphasizes that.
And even in his attempt to find the perfect gift for his sister.
The last episode, I guess.
Right, there's this connection to their shared family history.
Right, and his desire to connect with her on a deeper level.
His mom's appreciation for his storytelling and their I love you exchange are these little moments of warmth and reassurance.
Yeah, those small gestures can mean so much.
But then there's the disruption of his brother's delayed arrival for his birthday dinner because of the snow.
And his mom's frustration.
It highlights those underlying stresses in their family.
Right, things aren't always perfect.
And Charlie's own sadness on his birthday, which is triggered by those memories of Aunt Helen.
Yeah, it's a recurring pattern.
It is.
Grief and loss.
And his mom comforts him, and they put up the luminaria as a distraction.
It's their way of coping.
And he decides to start reading his mom's copy of a book, picking up where he left off with Bill's.
Okay.
And it makes him think about getting his driver's license.
Oh, yeah, free
Right,
show.
a step towards independence.
And he even talks about his driver's ed class.
Which wasn't exactly thrilling.
But it's all part of that process of growing up.
It is, and his dad likes the MASH gift, and they share this unspoken memory.
It's a subtle but meaningful connection between them.
Yeah, but then there's that awkward car ride to Ohio for Christmas.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's dominated by his brother's relationship with a cheerleader named Kelly, and all these conversations about cheerleading.
Interesting.
And the political climate at the time, the ERA, the Democratic candidate challenging George Bush.
So there are some political undercurrents.
There are.
And then his brother makes that big words comment.
Oh.
And his sister rolls her eyes.
Classic sibling dynamics.
And later, while he's in his dad's old room in Ohio, he starts thinking about his father's decision to leave home.
And it brings up all these questions about his family history.
And his place in it.
Yeah.
And then they don't visit Aunt Helen's grave on the drive back home.
And his mom's clearly feeling guilty about her death.
And the family's silence about it.
It points to this unresolved trauma within the family.
It's like there's this big secret hanging over them.
And then Charlie finally reveals the bad thing that happened to Aunt Helen.
Oh, wow.
She was molested by a close family friend.
Oh, my God.
And she didn't receive any support.
That's heartbreaking.
It is, and she struggles with alcohol and drugs.
It explains so much about her life.
It does, and her decision to move in with their family, the changes she makes and her bond with Charlie become even more significant in light of this revelation.
Right, she was trying to overcome so much.
And then her death in the car accident on Charlie's 7th birthday.
Oh, wow.
The policeman's kindness and Charlie's delayed understanding of what happened.
That's a lot for a child to process, host speaker.